You bitches ready to see one of the greatest tactical moves of Caesar's career? Caesar, a man known for being one of, if not the best Roman military men of all time. This is the story of how Caesar of Rome defeated Vercingetorix of the Arverni, how Rome conquered Gaul at the Battle of Alesia. Now before we start, you may notice that I say Vercingetorix. There are a few different pronunciations, including Vercingetorix and Vercingetorix, to name a few, but I'm going to say Vercingetorix. Alright, got it? So when Caesar was conquering his way through Gaul, the Gallic tribes united in a confederacy to defend their land under Vercingetorix. There was then a series of battles, raids and sieges in which both sides claimed victories. This culminated in the Battle of Alesia. Vercingetorix had ran a scorched earth campaign, and this was because Caesar had been living off the land and had abandoned his supply train due to the need.
The need for speed.
Vercingetorix had set up in Alesia with all his supplies. Caesar, giving chase, sets up camp outside the city. Vercingetorix had a lot of strengths and he was playing into them. He outnumbered the Romans, he had more supplies, he was on home turf, he had reinforcements coming, and of course he had the high ground.
It's over!
Caesar.
I have the high ground!
Caesar, recognising this, began to build a wall around Alesia in an attempt to mitigate some of Vercingetorix's advantages. Caesar, for his part, did have one advantage, and that was that his men were better trained. Walling in his opponents did several things. It means he can't send for his reinforcements, it mitigates his numbers advantage, and it means they can't be resupplied. It also means his high ground isn't too useful with the wall up. Of course, while it was being built, the Gauls harassed the Romans, but eventually the walls were built. They were 11 Roman miles long. A Roman mile is slightly shorter than a modern one. Vercingetorix, realising his situation was getting worse, sent for his reinforcements. Now, some of the messengers, either they were captured or they were traitors to his cause, gave this information to the Romans. Caesar, now knowing that a reinforcement was coming, did something that is considered a stroke of genius. He built a second wall, 14 Roman miles long around the outside. Now, Caesar's legions had their whole world reduced to the few yards between the inner and the outer walls. Vercingetorix's reinforcements arrived for battle, and it would start the following day. Vercingetorix's force outnumbered Caesar and was pushing from both sides. The entrapped Gauls and relieving Gauls saw weakness in the walls and began breaking through. Caesar, in a last-ditch attempt to win, held off the ones breaking through on the inner wall and sent a cavalry detachment round to flank the ones on the outer wall. The cavalry attacked and the outer forces eventually made retreat. Caesar then pushed the inner forces and Vercingetorix eventually surrendered. Caesar, of course, used this as a political tool, inflating his victory and hiding his losses. He kept Vercingetorix as a prisoner for 6 years before garroting him. That's where an iron collar is tightened round the neck till the person suffocates. Pretty fucking mental. Romans are fucked, man. To be fair, both sides were awful. I mean, Vercingetorix let everyone except his fighters die of starvation to save rations. So he sent away sick, elderly, women, children, all that stuff just to make sure he could win. He didn't even win. And Caesar slaughtered so many civilians that, well, one definitely seems worse in my opinion, but I'll let you decide. It's Caesar. This has not only had a political influence in ancient times, but in the 19th century there was a rise in French nationalism because, you know, revolution. And looking back in their past, the French wanted to find their cultural heritage. Looking back, they found a little-known figure in Vercingetorix and idolised him. He was a bastion of French freedom and defence against tyranny, the same sort of tyrants that they had just overthrown. God, I know calling Caesar a tyrant isn't going to end up well. It's like when I called Cyrus a tyrant all over again. Oh. Here is some French art. You can see the way they portray Vercingetorix, glowing in shining armour like a classical hero. And the Romans are portrayed as malnourished, aging, weak, arrogant, grey. I mean, just look at Caesar reposed on a throne. I don't compliment the French very often, so you've got this one. I'll give it you. Good job. Don't get used to it. So that's the story of how Caesar bested Vercingetorix. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, if you liked the video, comment down below, leave a like and subscribe, ring that bell if you want notifications. Follow my socials in the description down below, along with my subreddit. My TIL vids is down there if you're on YouTube, and if you're on TIL, it will be my It'll be my YouTube that's down there. As always, I will see you next week, babies.